Let me give you some backstory. I met my best friend 6 years ago, and we've been inseparable ever since. Shortly after us meeting, she started dating her now husband, and naturally, with us spending so much time together, we all eventually became very close friends. About 2 years ago or so, he started referring to me as his sister, telling my best friend and me that I was like the sister he never had. At the time I agreed, and for a while, it was just that. Eventually, I started feeling as though he uses the title to justify how close we are, and to push the boundaries of our friendship. This sibling label just feels like a way to make our closeness appear more innocent to others. I've been aware that he tends to walk the line of how friendly he can be with me. While I've maintained our close and playful friendship, I've always been cautious that he might be pushing his boundaries. His wife, my best friend, has seen and known about our closeness, but she's never shown any discomfort or concern, which has been confusing to me. I've definitely felt that he's sometimes overstepped in front of her, and she has never said anything. Let me give a few examples in chronological order, I think, starting about 3 years ago. He got blackout drunk at a get-together once and started throwing up outside. My best friend asked me to watch him because she doesn't handle puke well, so I stayed with him. After a bit, he started trying to hold my hand, and despite me pulling away, he kept trying after a few seconds. I told myself that he was so drunk, he must have thought I was my best friend and confused us, but something about it felt off. The next day, he told us he had blacked out and didn't remember a thing, so I gave him the benefit of the doubt and never mentioned anything. But a few weeks later, he brought up something he told me that day while we were outside, something that he wouldn't have remembered telling me if he'd actually been blacked out. I don't remember the context of this situation, but one day at their house, there was nowhere to sit, and he patted his lap and motioned for me to sit on his lap. His wife was sitting right next to him and either didn't see or didn't think it was weird, I guess. Another time, my best friend and I went out for happy hour and got drunk, and he had to pick us up. Once we got home, I was laying on the couch with my eyes closed, and he came and sat next to me and started talking to me. I honestly don't remember what he said, but I remember feeling him scoot closer to me until his thigh was touching my arm. And I remember telling him he needed to scoot over before his wife came and thought something was up. He didn't end up moving, and she walked out and asked what was going on. And he said he was just checking on me. Her and I went back to the room, and she asked me something along the lines of, was he being inappropriate? And I told her no, because I honestly didn't know what to think. Was he? Was that enough to be considered inappropriate? He didn't seem to be trying to hide it at all, which made me think I was maybe thinking too deep into it. Anyways, that was never brought up again either. Another time I was at their house and went to go say hi to him with a hug. My best friend was in their room and he hugged me. Despite me trying to pull away twice, he didn't let go until he heard the bedroom door open. The hug was maybe 7 or so seconds long, which we never do. Recently, we were all out together, and I looked up at him and said something, and he looked me in the eyes and said, "Ugh, those eyes," and just stared into my soul literally as we were standing directly next to his wife. She again either didn't notice or didn't think it was weird. Also, a few months ago, he grabbed my phone without me noticing and cleared out all of my apps. I hadn't noticed that he even knew my password. And when I asked him how long he'd known it, he told me a few years. This made me so uncomfortable I changed the password right away because I couldn't stop imagining him purposely going through it and finding my nudes or something, which I keep in my hidden folder. But if he has my password, what difference does it make? A few weeks later, he noticed I had changed it, and though he didn't directly say anything, I caught the vibe that he wasn't happy about it. So after all these things and a few I'm probably forgetting, his mental health starts visibly declining. Especially when he's around me, he gets quiet and moody. He starts hinting that he's dealing with something but won't say what it is. And a few months ago, he started slowly hinting that the thing is really serious, and he can't trust anyone with the information. At this point, I'm mentally preparing myself for a confession of love. Despite everything, I didn't want to believe it. No one ever expects to find themselves in a situation like this. And then, a couple of days ago, it happened. Kinda. He told me flat out that he recently realized that he has something called erotomania, and that he wanted to clarify that he has never cheated on his wife and that he loves her very much, but it's just something that is consuming him, and he doesn't know how to handle it on his own anymore. He said it's all he thinks about and that he has a serious obsession. Erotomania is a rare psychotic disorder and subtype of delusional disorder that causes people to have delusions that someone else is in love with them. The person believed to be in love is usually someone of higher social or financial status, like a celebrity, boss, or president, who is out of reach or already in a relationship. Also, for context, this is the disorder that Joe Goldberg from You also suffers from. I mention that because he told me that he feels a connection to Joe in a non-crazy way. I also want to mention that up until this point, he hasn't straight up told me that this has anything to do with me. But today while we were texting, he started telling me about his you. He said his you had become his obsession, and he didn't know if he was delusional or if it was mutual. After he went into detail about why he was so obsessed with his you, it became pretty undeniable that I am the one he's referring to, though neither of us has called it out. At the end of the conversation, he asked what I would do if I were him, and I told him to do some deep self-reflecting about what he wants in life, because carrying on like this isn't fair to him or especially his wife, and that he needs to be proactive about seeking professional help. That's where he cut the conversation. This confession has obviously put me in a very difficult situation. I'm trying to figure out the best way to approach it. He is my friend, so I want to be supportive without encouraging his delusions, but I really don't know where to go from here. It's obvious that he needs professional help, but he's not currently ready to seek therapy. I'll continue to suggest it, but where does that leave me and my best friend? I feel like my brain hasn't processed any of this yet. I feel kind of numb and void of feelings. How would she feel if she found out? How do I tell her, your husband has become obsessed with me? Should I even tell her? Should I make him tell her? My hope is that he will see a professional, and they will help him deal with the situation how they best see fit. But in the meantime, literally, what the frick? Almost forgot, it's been a couple of days now, and after speaking to my parents, husband, and therapist about this, it's finally sunk in. When I initially wrote this post, I was in shock and denial, and was trying every which way to rationalize this in a way that would ultimately hurt everyone less. Since then, I've realized that my best friend and I have both fallen victim to his manipulation and emotional mind games. I should have trusted my gut every time it told me something was off, but he knew that I would empathize with him, and he played his cards in a way that would have me questioning my own reality. A friend of mine told me intentions don't always matter, and that sometimes we need to take people's actions for what they are. At the end of the day, regardless if I'm struggling to accept, if this was all played out intentionally with malice, or if it's something he just let get out of hand, it was not my responsibility to keep his feelings in check for him. He should have sought professional help long ago, like I've always suggested to him, and he should have done everything he could to squash the feelings he had towards me rather than nurture them with fantasies about us being together someday and letting it get to the point of becoming a dangerous obsession. My therapist is now seriously concerned for mine and my best friend's safety. Although it's become pretty clear to us all that this delusional disorder is a hoax, that doesn't take away from the fact that he's taken this obsession to a dangerous level. And he does still seem to be wrapped up in this illusion that somehow we can be together and make it work with his wife. I've sent him a long message telling him I'm no longer going to be a pawn in his fantasies, and that he needs to come clean to his wife about everything he's told me and whatever else I may not know about. I've let her know that he has something to say to her, and that I'll be here for her for whatever she may need, going forward in whichever way makes her most comfortable. For everyone who is kind and understanding of this sensitive situation, I thank you greatly for your grace and understanding toward me while I processed this shoot show. And to everyone else who was quick to say that it was obvious and to even blame me or say I'm deserving of losing my friend, I want to say that, of course, it's obvious to everyone reading this when everything has been laid out for you. But don't be so dense as to forget that this is a real-life situation that has taken place over many years, with real human beings, complex lives, and deep feelings involved. There's years of context you know nothing about. Blaming me for not seeing it is blaming a victim of emotional manipulation for not realizing they were being toyed with. I'm grateful that I have the emotional intelligence and confidence to know that his actions are not a reflection on me as a person or as a friend, and to not let those comments get in my head. I hope those of you can learn from this and use this as a reminder that you're just bystanders on the internet, and you don't have all the facts. Your comments can have big impacts on real people going through real situations. Anyways, that's all I have to say. Thank you for taking the time to read this. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. I don't feel like anyone here is freaking out enough about the fact that he has her passcode and felt comfortable not only using it, but deleting apps in her phone in front of people. There is no excuse for this, OP, and apparently no one in your life gives a shoot. You are way too caught up in the perceived impropriety of his behavior. He is doing things that his wife should dump him for. That is 100% on him. Your refusal to stand up for yourself here is enabling behavior. Stop being around him. Stop keeping his secrets. Don't argue. Yes, they are. Stop enabling his creepy butt behavior. Comment 2. Why is this even a discussion? Tell your friend immediately. Yes, it's horrible for you, and it sucks that you're in this situation, but that's her husband, and at best he's making excuses. At worst, he's very seriously mentally ill and needs help. Honestly, it sounds, from what you've described, she's seen his behavior around you and turned a blind eye, and cut contact with him and reduce it with her unless there are active plans in place to deal with the situation and tangible evidence of progress made. I doubt his erotomania story, but even so, it's better to be safe than sorry. Now for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for reading my last post. So, it's been 2 weeks since everything went down, and things have been pretty intense. After I sent that message to him, I didn't hear back for a couple of days, which made me really anxious. I was constantly checking my phone, half expecting some kind of dramatic response. Instead, he finally replied with a short message saying he needed time to process everything. That was it. No apology, no explanation, just that he needed time. It felt like a cop-out, but I decided to give him the space he asked for. In the meantime, I had to deal with my best friend. I told her that her husband had something important to tell her, and that I would be there for her no matter what. She looked confused and worried, but didn't press me for details. I could see the anxiety building up in her eyes, and it broke my heart. I wanted to tell her everything right then and there, but I knew it wasn't my place. She deserved to hear it from him. A few days later, she called me in tears. He had finally told her about his obsession and how it had been affecting him. She was devastated, not just because of his feelings for me, but because he had kept such a huge part of his life hidden from her. She felt betrayed and confused, and I didn't know how to comfort her. All I could do was listen and be there for her. As we talked, she started to open up about their relationship. She admitted that she had noticed his behavior, but had convinced herself that it was harmless. She didn't want to believe that her husband could be capable of such deceit. She told me about their early years together, how they had been so in love and how he had always been her rock. Hearing her talk about their past made me realize just how much they had both lost because of his actions. One night, she came over to my place, and we sat on the couch, drinking wine and talking about everything. She asked me if I had ever felt anything for him, and I told her the truth. I had always seen him as a friend, nothing more. She seemed relieved, but still hurt. I could see the pain in her eyes, and it made me feel guilty, even though I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. As we continued talking, she revealed something that took me by surprise. She told me that she had been feeling distant from him for a while, even before all of this came to light. She had been struggling with her own feelings and had been considering leaving him. This revelation made me realize that their relationship had been on shaky ground for a long time, and his obsession with me was just the final straw. In the days that followed, I tried to keep my distance from both of them. I needed time to process everything and figure out what my next steps should be. I focused on my own life, spending time with my husband, and trying to find some sense of normalcy. But it was hard to escape the constant thoughts and emotions swirling around in my head. One evening, I got a call from him. He sounded desperate and broken, begging me to meet him so we could talk. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a quiet park, and he looked like a shell of the person I once knew. He apologized profusely, saying he never meant to hurt anyone and that he was seeking professional help. He admitted that he had been in denial about his feelings and had let them spiral out of control. As we talked, I could see the genuine remorse in his eyes, but it didn't change the fact that he had caused so much pain. I told him that while I appreciated his apology, it didn't erase the damage he had done. I made it clear that our friendship could never go back to the way it was, and that he needed to focus on repairing his relationship with his wife. After that conversation, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. I knew I had done the right thing, but it still hurt to see someone I cared about in so much pain. I couldn't help but wonder if there was something I could have done differently to prevent all of this from happening. In the following days, my best friend decided to take some time away from her husband. She stayed with her parents and started seeing a therapist to help her process everything. She told me that she needed to figure out what she wanted and whether their marriage was worth saving. I supported her decision and promised to be there for her no matter what. As for him, he continued to seek professional help and started attending therapy sessions regularly. He reached out to me a few times, updating me on his progress and thanking me for pushing him to get help. While I appreciated his efforts, I knew that our friendship would never be the same. Throughout all of this, I couldn't help but reflect on my own life and relationships. I realized that I had been so focused on helping others that I had neglected my own needs and feelings. I started to prioritize my own well-being, spending more time with my husband and focusing on my own mental health. In the end, this whole ordeal has been a wake-up call for all of us. It's forced us to confront our own issues and take a hard look at our relationships. While it's been incredibly painful, I believe that it's also been a necessary step towards healing and growth. Thank you for taking the time to read this. Aita for leaving my husband after he decided he doesn't want kids anymore. My husband and I have been together since I was 26, and we married when I was 28. I feel completely happy and satisfied in our relationship. We both work hard to keep it very healthy, and we have both matured with each other and improved individually throughout our relationship. There is nobody else that I could imagine being with. From before we even started dating, we talked about having a family, how many kids we wanted, how we envisioned our future, and it was something we both agreed on. We wanted kids. We wanted them after we were married and had saved a bit. When I met my husband, I was finishing up med school. When I finished, I pushed to have kids, but he didn't want us to start because I was starting my first year of residency, and he was worried about what the stress would do to me and the baby. After I finished my first year, we kept trying, and I wasn't able to get pregnant. We eventually went with in vitro fertilization, and we have 7 embryos, which are healthy, that are being stored. We put off implantation for a bit because I have a genetic disease, and we wanted to test the embryos, so we would only implant the ones without this disease. Then we decided to wait a bit more so that I could finish my residency. I finished, and I have been working for a bit. We tried implanting the first 2, and it failed. I wanted to try again, and my husband suddenly told me that he doesn't want kids anymore. He said that the world is so messed up that he can't in good conscience bring another human being into it. So I asked him to bring one in bad conscience, and he said no. Then I talked to him about adoption. We don't need to have our own kids, but there are many kids already alive without loving homes. Why not adopt? He said no. Then I asked what he wants to do with our embryos. He said donate them to stem cell research or destroy them. It really broke my heart. So I asked him why he just changed his mind so suddenly. And he finally told me the truth. He said he feels like we have the perfect life together. He likes life with just me without kids. All our friends have kids. And he sees how they basically have to build their lives and schedules around their kids. They can't be spontaneous, they don't have time for each other, etc. Last year we traveled to 13 countries, and half of them were spontaneous. In January alone, we traveled to 4 countries this year, and we still have so many trips planned. My husband is a software engineer, and I'm a cardiologist. We make so much money that we have bought everything we want and invested. If we keep up our work, we can retire by the time he's 40. I understand what he's saying, and I do see the busyness in our friends' and siblings' lives. But being a mother is something I've always wanted. Making a baby with my husband is something that I want so much. It's not enough for me to be an aunt. I want to have my own baby to hold. I love my husband so much, but this is breaking my heart. I can't imagine doing life without my husband, but I don't want to give up on being a mom. I honestly don't know what I'll do if he doesn't change his mind. If I stay, I know I'll be depressed, but the thought of leaving someone who is so amazing makes me feel valued. Someone I love so much and has supported me in every way. Someone who is my best friend and I want to grow old with. I don't think I can do it. Now for an update. My husband doesn't want kids anymore, but I still do. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. I was your husband 5 years ago, a software engineer with 7 years of experience, and I am now 34 years old. At one point, we were trying for kids, and it didn't happen. In retrospect, I never really wanted them. It just seemed like what I was supposed to be doing. That turned out to be a theme in my life. We amicably separated, and she has an adopted son now. I'm about to move my life onto a boat and sail it around the world. Y'all need to go to counseling together. The outcome of that type of work is not to save your relationship. It's to help communicate and determine the correct path forward for both of you. Comment 2. He is making a choice for himself, and you have to make a choice for yourself. If children are something you have always wanted and don't want to be without, adopted or biological, then you know what the answer is. You are lucky. It sounds like you have the finances to be able to do this on your own without that added fear. I know doctors and nurse practitioners who have gone ahead on their own with no regrets. It is okay for things to end. Now for the update. Hey everyone, a lot has happened since my last post. After my husband told me he didn't want kids anymore, I was devastated. We had several long, emotional conversations about it. I tried to understand his perspective, but it was hard to reconcile with my own deep desire to be a mother. We decided to take a 2-week break from the topic to clear our heads and think things through. During this time, I threw myself into my work. Being a cardiologist is demanding, and it helped to have something to focus on. But every time I saw a child at the hospital or a pregnant woman, it was like a knife to the heart. I couldn't stop thinking about the embryos we had stored and the future I had always envisioned. My husband, on the other hand, seemed more relaxed. He started planning more trips and even booked a surprise weekend getaway for us. It was his way of showing me the life we could have without kids, full of adventure and spontaneity. I appreciated the effort, but it felt like he was trying to distract me from the issue at hand. One night, after a particularly stressful day at work, I came home to find my husband in the kitchen, cooking my favorite meal. We sat down to eat, and he brought up the topic again. He said he had been doing a lot of thinking and wanted to propose a compromise. He suggested that we take a year off from trying to have kids and focus on enjoying our life together. After that year, if I still wanted to have a baby, he would be open to revisiting the idea. I was torn. On one hand, it felt like a step forward, but on the other hand, it felt like he was just buying time. I agreed to the compromise, but deep down, I was worried that he would never change his mind. A week later, something unexpected happened. I was at work when I received a call from my husband. He sounded panicked and told me he had been laid off. His company was downsizing, and despite his excellent performance, he was one of the employees let go. This was a huge blow to him, and I could hear the fear in his voice. When I got home, he was sitting on the couch staring at his laptop. He had been looking for job openings, but hadn't found anything promising. We talked about our options, and I reassured him that we would get through this together. But inside, I was worried. Our plans for early retirement and our financial stability were suddenly in jeopardy. Over the next few days, my husband became increasingly withdrawn. He spent hours on his computer, applying for jobs and researching freelance opportunities. I tried to be supportive, but I could see the toll it was taking on him. He was stressed and irritable, and our conversations about having kids became even more strained. One evening, I came home to find him in the garage, working on a project. He had decided to start a small business, designing and selling custom software. It was a risky move, but he was determined to make it work. I admired his determination, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was another way for him to avoid the issue of having kids. As the weeks went by, my husband's business started to take off. He was working long hours, and while I was proud of him, it felt like we were drifting further apart. We barely had time for each other, and the topic of kids was completely off the table. Then, one night, everything came to a head. We were having dinner and I brought up the embryos again. I told him that I couldn't wait any longer and that I needed to know if he was ever going to change his mind. He looked at me with a pained expression and said that he couldn't promise anything. He loved our life together and didn't want to risk losing it. I felt a wave of anger and sadness wash over me. I told him that I couldn't keep living in limbo and that I needed to make a decision for myself. He looked devastated, but he didn't try to stop me. He just nodded and said he understood. That night, I packed a bag and went to stay with my sister. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but I knew I needed some space to think. Over the next few days, I tried to imagine my life without my husband. It was painful, but I couldn't ignore my desire to be a mother. I decided to consult a therapist to help me sort through my feelings. During our sessions, I realized that my desire to have a child was deeply rooted in my own childhood. My parents had always been loving and supportive, and I wanted to create that same kind of family for myself. I also realized that my husband's fear of losing our current lifestyle was just as valid as my desire to have a child. After 2 weeks of soul searching, I went back to talk to my husband. I told him that I loved him and that I didn't want to lose him, but I couldn't give up on my dream of being a mother. He listened quietly, and then he said something that broke my heart. He told me that he loved me too, but he couldn't see himself being a father. He said he didn't want to bring a child into the world if he couldn't be fully committed to being a parent. We both knew what this meant. Our marriage was at a crossroads, and there was no easy solution. We decided to take some time apart to figure out what we really wanted. It was a painful decision, but we both knew it was necessary. As I packed my things and prepared to move out, I couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. I had always imagined growing old with my husband, but now that future seemed uncertain. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I had to follow my heart. Thank you for reading. Aita for confronting my best friend about his affair. While he and his wife are trying to have a baby through IVF, my best friend, 33-year-old male, and I, 32-year-old male, have been inseparable since we were 5. We went to school together, did most of life's major milestones together, and I consider him my brother in all but blood. When his grandmother passed while we were in high school, she even had me in her will, leaving me a small trust to use for college. For as long as I can remember, his family has been mine and vice versa. We both got married in 2017. Our wives are very close and have been since we were dating. While I'm not as close with her as my wife, I see his wife like my sister, and I care about her the same way. 3 days ago, I was riding in my best friend's car when he asked me to put on some music. I picked up his phone and entered his passcode. We've both known each other's passcodes for years. While I was navigating Spotify, a text came through from a pizza place that said, "Coming over tonight." I sat there stunned for a few seconds before turning and asking him who the heck pizza place was. He immediately started yelling at me for going through his messages before I told him what happened. He pulled over into a parking lot, and we spent a few minutes yelling at each other until he finally came clean. He's been hooking up with a coworker for about a month. He says that he still loves his wife and has no intentions of leaving her. He begged me not to tell his wife and that he's going to find a way to break it off with this other woman, but says he's in too deep to just ghost her and doesn't know how to cut it off yet. He swears it will never happen again, and that his mistake doesn't warrant ruining his and his wife's marriage. After some back and forth, I reluctantly agreed to stay quiet. But later that day, I remembered something that might change my mind. He and his wife started the process of in vitro fertilization a few months ago. I haven't pressed for details, but she has used my wife as support through the process, and I know it has been very taxing on her. Ultimately, my dilemma is this. Is it right for me to keep this a secret, knowing that they are trying to bring a child into the world, and knowing that the child could be born into a broken home if his wife finds out after she gets pregnant? I'm torn between the friend that I love, like my brother, and what I feel would be the right thing to do. I know I'm not the one who is wronged here, but I feel so betrayed and angry. I feel like he's done something that's going to tear apart the small family the 4 of us have built together, and the bigger one we planned on having one day. I know he's not a bad person, and up to this point, I'm pretty sure he's been a model husband. I'm so unsure what to do, and I need help. To add, thank you all for your replies and advice. I talked to my wife last night, and she asked a friend's wife to come over tomorrow night to talk. I'll update with more details afterwards. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Put your marriage first. Think of the steps you would have to take to pretend you did not know. You are already considering lying to 2 people and letting a third get born. The moment your wife knows, she is going to replay every second of your relationship. We always wonder what the best friend knew, and no amount of righteous anger on your part is going to excuse covering for a cheater. You keeping this secret will reframe everything permanently. You will never undo that damage. And if you let a baby get conceived before the wife knows, well, that damage is going to be nuclear. Tell the truth and do it fast. That may be a brother to you, but the other side of that coin is he lies to you and betrays you like anyone else, and probably has an easier time of it due to the length of your bond. There's the truth, or permanently damaging and possibly ending your own marriage. That's the choice. Comment 2. You are kind of in a bit of a pickle here. If you want to try to salvage the friendship, you can go to him and tell him that you thought about it and cannot keep this from your wife, and will struggle to lie to his wife/everyone else. You can then give him a time date to tell his wife by, or you will do it yourself, and then follow through. If you hide this from your wife, it is going to blow up in your face spectacularly. As an aside, in vitro fertilization, IVF, is incredibly taxing on the human body, as is pregnancy. Pregnancy is or can be life-threatening very easily and quickly, even for a healthy pregnancy. Do you feel okay with what his wife is going to put herself through physically if she continues to be oblivious to what he is doing? Emotional mental toll aside, which is considerable in and of itself. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, a lot has happened since the last post. So, my wife and I had a long talk after I told her everything. She was shocked and upset, but she agreed that we needed to handle this delicately. We decided that she would talk to my best friend's wife first, to gauge her emotional state and see if she suspected anything. The next evening, my wife invited her over under the pretense of needing some girl time. They spent a few hours chatting, and my wife subtly brought up the IVF process to see how she was feeling. It turns out she was already feeling stressed and overwhelmed, and my wife decided it wasn't the right time to drop the bomb. Meanwhile, I was wrestling with my conscience. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was betraying my best friend's wife by keeping this secret. I decided to confront my best friend again. I told him that he needed to come clean to his wife, especially considering the IVF process. He was resistant at first, but I could see the guilt eating away at him. He finally agreed to tell her, but he wanted to do it on his own terms. The next day, my best friend called me and said he was going to tell his wife that evening. He asked me to be there for support, which I reluctantly agreed to. That evening, my wife and I went over to their house. My best friend and his wife sat down, and he started to explain everything. She was devastated, as expected, but she appreciated his honesty. She asked for some time to process everything, and we all left to give her space. The following day, my best friend's wife called my wife and asked if she could come over to talk. They spent hours discussing everything, and my wife told me later that she was considering forgiving him, but she needed to see real change. She also mentioned that she was worried about the IVF process and how this stress might affect it. My wife reassured her that she was there for her no matter what. In the midst of all this, my best friend was a wreck. He was terrified of losing his wife and the future they had planned. He started going to therapy to work on his issues and figure out why he had cheated in the first place. He also cut off all contact with the coworker and even considered finding a new job to avoid any temptation. A few days later, my best friend's wife decided to give him another chance, but with some conditions. They would go to couples therapy, and he would have to be completely transparent with her about everything. She also wanted to put the IVF process on hold until they had worked through their issues. My best friend agreed to all of her terms, and they started working on rebuilding their relationship. During this time, I couldn't help but reflect on our friendship and how much it had been tested. I realized that my best friend had always been there for me, and I needed to be there for him now, even though he had made a huge mistake. I also saw how strong his wife was, and how much she loved him despite everything. As they started therapy, my best friend and his wife began to make progress. They were communicating better and addressing the underlying issues in their relationship. My wife and I continued to support them, and we all spent more time together as a group, trying to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. One evening, my best friend and I were sitting on his porch, talking about everything that had happened. He opened up about his fears and insecurities, and I could see how much he regretted his actions. He told me that he was determined to be a better husband and, hopefully, a father one day. I could see the sincerity in his eyes, and I knew he was committed to making things right. As the weeks went by, things slowly started to improve. My best friend's wife decided to resume the IVF process, and they were both cautiously optimistic about their future. They continued therapy and worked on their relationship every day. My wife and I were there for them every step of the way. And our bond as friends grew even stronger. Looking back, I realized that this experience had taught me a lot about forgiveness, loyalty, and the complexities of relationships. It wasn't easy, and there were times when I doubted if we would all make it through. But in the end, we did, and our friendships and marriages were stronger for it. Thank you all for reading. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.